Welcome back to semester 2 and to Vital. We're so glad you're here. We hope you're blessed by worship and teaching by Dave. If you don't know who we are, I'm Emma, this is Ben.
Hello.
And Naomi, George and Connor. You're going to say what? You're so welcome whether you're part of the chaplaincy or you're just visiting. We hope you enjoy and have a really good time. Grab a cup of tea or coffee and just relax. Thank you so much.
Devices, that we all are still together here worshiping you. And I thank you that you have just given us the ability to do that. I pray that as the incoming weeks and months come in, that we are just overflowing with the Holy Spirit, Lord, that even in our interactions, which are small, we will just continue to praise your name and be a complete witness for your kingdom, Lord. Amen.
Worthy of all the praise we could ever bring.
Well, good evening, and can I add my welcome to Vital? And thank you to Emma, thank you to George and Connor and Ben and Naomi for leading us so wonderfully at the beginning of our time together. Let me pray for us as we start into this new semester. Lord, no matter where we are, I pray that you would bless us tonight. It's not easy connecting on screens again, but Lord, even in this moment, I ask that for all of the guys that are watching tonight, that they would be encouraged, that they would be quickened in their thinking, in their emotional connection, and in their faith story to you. And I pray this in your name, Jesus. Amen. Well, we are launching this new semester of Vital. We are online, sadly, but that is just part of the time that we're living in. Our topic tonight is Beginnings Call. I wonder how many of you still identify with a weekend feeling. Well, it's a bit of a challenge in our house at the moment. We have got my wife Jane. She is teaching. The kids are at home. They're homeschooling at secondary school. We're in the house so much that weekends maybe don't feel so much of a big deal. But Friday nights, we still try to make a big night in to launch us into the weekend. And this couple of Friday nights ago, we were down in the city of Lisburn, called into an amazing butcher's, Andy Mulholland's, and we got the hold of some fillet steaks and some garlic fries, and beautiful. What a great start to the weekend. But then the icing on the cake, the moment I've been waiting for, it was the launch of Wonder Woman 1984 to streaming services. What's not to love? We've got the lasso of truth. We've got those bracelets that stop bullets. We've got the tiara that acts like a boomerang. Got Wonder Woman power. It's fantastic. One of the things I loved about the movie was the view of her beginnings, of her origin story. We saw her as a girl training up, and we saw all the challenges that she was connecting into, but we also got a view of what mattered in her home, and that was priority of truth and truthfulness. And that then sets the scene for the rest of the film. No matter what superhero you're into, they all have an origin story. Peter Parker starts off with this geek, gets bitten by a radioactive spider, doesn't get bullied anymore. Uncle Ben pulls him into line and says, look, with great power comes great responsibility. And then he started to live for others and became Spider-Man. Star-Lord has got a beginning. X-Men have all got their origin stories. Any of the superheroes have got these origin stories. In our reading tonight, we have a view of the origin story of Jesus's first disciples. And we read about that in Matthew 4 and Matthew 9, as well as other places, but that's where we're going to focus our story tonight. So this is what the story goes like. As Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew. They were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. Come follow me, Jesus said, and I will send you out to fish for people. And at once they left their nets and they followed him. Going on from there, he saw two other brothers, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. They were in a boat with their father Zebedee, preparing their nets. And Jesus called them, and immediately they left the boat and their father, and they followed him. And then we're going to move on to Matthew chapter 9. As Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. Follow me, he told him. And Matthew got up and followed him. While Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" And on hearing this, Jesus said, "Look, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, for I have come to call the righteous, not come to call the righteous, but sinners. So in Matthew 4, Jesus is in this familiar territory around Lake Galilee. And the people of the lake, they've started to notice him. They've maybe heard him before. They've been impacted by his presence, his perspective, his power. And yet he was quite new on the scene. A magnetic young preacher walking along the side of the lake, talking about his Father. Luke gives us a bit more of the origin story. It tells us that Peter's boat was used by Jesus as a floating pulpit. And Peter and the others would have heard his message. They'd have been impacted by his vision. But they've also been convinced by his power to change circumstances. The night that they were out, he filled their nets with fish. And they were able then to have plenty to actually have in their catch. Jesus provided for them. And so on that day when he says, come follow me, these young guys would have been blown away by the incredible and very unlikely possibility that this amazing teacher and leader had even noticed them. Unremarkable working class teenagers as they were. But not only has he noticed them, he offers them the chance to become his disciples, to join in this mission that he is talking about, to be part of something big that is going to happen. It's the big ask. Are you in? If you are, follow me. Jesus is saying to them, look, fellas, I see you. And I think that you are worth it. You are worth investing in, because my Father is going to begin a good work in each of you. And he and I will keep working in you right through your lives until that day whenever I make all things new and you become fully like me. And even though they don't yet know all that story, they know enough as they look at Jesus and they jump at the chance. They say, yes, we will follow you. And it's contagious. Their buddies James and John see and hear what's happening. And when Jesus calls them, they don't hesitate either to throw in their nets and their towels and go on furlough from fishing in order to fish for people, in order to live a life of following and learning and doing miraculous things. And they would have been aware, even at that stage, they'd be stepping in also to the storm of accusation and opposition. But they still respond and they follow. It's a great origin story, and one that they must, in their older years, have revisited again and again. I'm sure they'd have smiled and sat back and wondered. Maybe they'd have laughed at the direction that decision actually took their lives on. And by the time we get to Matthew 9, there's been a lot of action already in their shared mission with Jesus. The Sermon on the Mount has happened. There's been many healings. The Lord's Prayer has been taught. The storm has been calmed on the lake. There's been encounters with demonic forces, increased scrutiny from other religious leaders. And so whenever we arrive in chapter 9, we get this description of Matthew, or Levi, a professional young guy who is sold out to the oppressors of his nation to become part of the ruling Roman system, joining a band of wealthy collaborators whose employment it was to gather in as much money by whatever means from their subjugated neighbours. And he would have been wealthy. He would have had a lifestyle. He would have had job security. But in the view of his family, of all of his old friends, of his neighbours, he would have been totally appalling. And it would have been most appalling of all to a group called the Pharisees, religious leaders. Now, these guys had a motivation of trying to bring the people to a point of purity. And they wanted to do that in order to herald in God's rule and reign, so that they could be free from the Romans. All the Jewish nation, if that was going to happen, were going to have to follow those purity laws to the letter. Not just the priests, who they were originally written for. Everyone would need to follow the purity laws. And that's why they were so fierce about who they ate with and who they associated with. There's a writer called Tim Chester who writes a book called A Meal with Jesus. And he says doing lunch in those days was literally doing theology. And he was right. The Pharisees look at Jesus and they're thinking, if this guy is really from God, then he's going to hang out with the goodies. He's going to eat with the pure people, and that's people like us. And there's zero chance that he would be calling or spending time with tax collectors, sinners, and certainly not this guy Matthew. And certainly he wouldn't have been asking him to follow him and become one of his disciples. But Jesus views Matthew through a completely different lens. And Jesus says, you've got to stop thinking PSNI and start thinking NHS. If you think you're healthy enough, then you're never going to be calling 999. You're only going to want to come to me if you recognize that you're sick. Recognize your sickness, but don't be too proud, or equally don't be too dismissive of your value. Recognize the help you need is available, but it's only going to be given if you go to the doctor. And Jesus is that doctor. And so when Jesus chooses Matthew gets that. And he gets up and he resigns, knowing that there will be no way back for him into that job and lifestyle. And Matthew follows. Jesus chooses Matthew, and he chooses Peter and Andrew and James and John and Mary and Martha and Nicodemus and Joanna and Bartholomew and all the rest. He chooses them because his movement is for everyone. It's for rich and it's for poor. It's for women and it's for men. It's for educated and unschooled. It's a movement not for the good enoughs, it's for the not good enoughs, for the sick people who realize that they need a doctor. And his call continues through every generation. He calls Paul, he calls Priscilla and Aquila, he calls Ethiopian people and Romans and Greeks, he calls Asians, he calls Africans, he even calls the Irish, he calls men and women, he calls kings and beggars, he calls creative people and practicals, he calls the sports people and the engineers and the musicians, and he says, follow me. So what's your origin story? At the end of this, I'd love us to pause, and that's what I'd love you to do, to tell each other your origin story. Talk with your flatmates, talk with the people that you're gathered with, maybe watching on a Zoom call. Hear each other's story. It is incredibly encouraging whenever we hear ourselves relating that story, but also whenever we hear the origin stories for other people. And maybe you're scratching your head thinking, I don't have an origin story. I don't have a beginning in my journey with God. Well, let me point you to probably the most famous verse in the Bible, to John 3:16. God, you see, loves you sufficiently, in fact, overwhelmingly. He looked at you and decided, you are worth it. I want to begin a good work in you. Begin it and keep it going. And I want that so much. I'm going to send Jesus, my only son, to become flesh and blood and live among you and experience every part of human life like yours, the good and the bad. And I'm going to allow Jesus to be brutally killed as a punishment in order that he becomes the eternal cure for all the sickness of sin and death that's part of your life, that's part of my life, that's part of the existence of all of humanity. And he's doing that so that real life in all its completeness, in its restored relationships and satisfaction can become ours. now, and extend right into eternity. And that's the offer that forms the core of an origin story for every follower of Jesus. It's incredible news. We call that news the gospel. And if you've never responded to that call today, before today, I would really encourage you. Jesus is saying to you that I see you. I think you are worth it. And I want to invest in you. And I'm going to do that because my Father is wanting so much to begin that good work in you and keep it going until that day when I make all things new and you become in your character and nature like me. It's like all of humanity. You are sick. I am sick. So today, don't be proud. Don't be dismissive of your value. Respond to the call of Jesus. And if you've never prayed into that, praying is just a conversation with God, just to acknowledge you are you, I am me, but I'm going to talk to you. And this is something you could pray. Jesus, I don't know what the full story is. I don't know where you want me to go, but today I hear your call. Follow me. And Jesus, that is what I want to do. Thank you for calling me. Thank you for being the cure for my sickness. Thank you for your death. That was the medicine to heal my sinfulness. Thank you for your resurrection, coming back to life in power. It proves you've got the power to do everything that you say. Thank you for your promise to never leave me or abandon me in my life of following you from this day on. Guys, whether that's the first time that you've started into this origin story or you're ready, journeying and you're going for it, remember, we can have the confidence that the Lord is with us. Keep working at it. Keep going. Your origin story is unpeeling. All those adventures are happening. You're becoming more and more that hero of faith that Jesus calls us to be, a pilgrim. That work is happening in you. And that adventure of faith is the one that we are living. So let me encourage you today. Don't forget that. Keep going back to your origin story. Keep keeping that fresh, because that shapes where we go, knowing where we've come from. So that's your challenge now. Chat through your origin story. Talk that through with the guys that you're with. And if you'd love to come back and just have a bit more conversation, in half an hour after you've had your cup of tea and your chat, please come back, join into the Zoom connection. It's there on the Facebook link, and you're able then to connect into the chaplaincy team. Some of the other students will be part of that as well. And we'd love you to come and join us just for an informal chat for half an hour. See how you're getting on. We can pray if you want, but also just to hear your story and to share some of the things that we have been talking about. Love to see you. God bless you.